DFW with your hosts, Robbie and Tracy Mitchell.
Hey, this is Holly Williams, and today on Live from DFW, Tracy is going to get in a freezer. Check it out.
This
right.
should be exciting.
Cryo Nation, Grapevine, Texas.
Okay,
Refreshing. Nitrogen. Are we gonna make bombs and blow things up, or are we gonna get well? What's up, Sammy Joe?
Well, hello, Robbie. Good to see you again.
We're here to get well. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We're gonna get Miss Tracy in for her cryo session today.
Yes.
All right, Tracy. I'm so excited. We're gonna get you good and cold today.
How cold?
Oh my gosh, -300 and below.
Oh, every time it gets in, but it always feels so good. It's
That's
worth
right.
it. I can do
It is.
anything for 3 minutes, right?
And if you freeze to death and don't come out, I love you.
All right, we'll get you lifted up. While you're in here, you just want to keep your chin tilted slightly up. We use nitrogen gas to cool you off. Nitrogen gas is safe. 78% of the air we normally breathe in is oxygen. Is nitrogen rather. There's just no oxygen in it. So that's why we lift you up to where your chin's elevated above the chamber. You just want to keep that chin tilted slightly up. And we'll get you started off here. While you're in here, there's no wrong way to face. You can move around in there. You can walk in place. You can periodically face different directions. It makes it easier, almost kind of doing these slow spins in a circle. Gets a more equal distribution of the nitrogen gas. Makes it easier as it's getting nice and cold. It's also entertaining for us to see you spin around in a circle.
The actual number?
Yeah, that's the temperature. Yeah, you were below. Yeah, -300. Yeah, you were down to -320 a second ago. Yeah, just about 2.5 times colder than the coldest place on Earth, the Antarctic. No big deal. The good news is you're already over the halfway point. You made it through the last cold blast. 20 seconds left. And you are there. Woo.
I did it.
That was good. We did not. That was a full-fledged blast there. So we did not go easy on you there.
All right, so what you're going to do for me before we start on this aromatherapy oxygen bar is choose your aroma for me. For instance, like lemongrass, it's very helpful with asthma or breathing issues that we might have, as well as eucalyptus is very good for, sinus, migraines, headaches, and that sort of thing. Yes, eucalyptus, Robbie.
Eucalyptus.
Yes.
Okay. That's good for sinuses and.
That is good for sinuses,
Okay.
migraines, headaches, and that. Yeah, and we have orange. It's very uplifting
I'll take that.
and awakens your mind. So there you go. You guys want, orange, and you want ukulele, is that
Ukulele.
correct? All right, fantastic. I'll go get you set
Thank
up.
you.
And would you mind the nasal canal over your head here for you, Robbie?
Okay.
Just want to put that up your nose for me. And
Up
then
your
around
nose too, girl.
Oh, thank you.
Sammy, I got one question.
Yes,
Do you all
sir.
clean these deals that go up your nose quite often?
Actually, to be honest with you, we give you a brand new nasal canal every single time for sanitary reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Stuff don't make you high or anything, does it?
No.
Well,
No.
Oh man.
Can you see? Can you see?
Okay, I smell it, man.
And for
smell
you,
it. I
Miss
mean, I-
Tracy, here's your nasal
Yes.
canal
Hold
for
on,
you,
man.
darling.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, dude. Senor. Good stuff.
I can't take you anywhere.
You
Look,
gotta see how you look.
you gotta see how you look.
I feel like a spaceman.
What?
Star
You
Trek
feel
or
like you're
something.
floating yet?
Well, on a daily basis, in the air that we only breathe about 21% oxygen. So this with a compressor allows you to breathe in 97 to 98% pure oxygen and can absorb it to all of your cells. Plus, we usually are in a very busy kind of mindset throughout our lives. This allows you to sit down, relax, and breathe deep and slowly, allowing that also essential aroma to do its magic work and help relieve symptoms like the migraine headaches we talked about and lighten the mind.
And Sammy hooked me up back there. I'm working on a special blend.
What kind of blend?
Lemongrass, ukulele, all
kind
of
of
it
grass?
together. I'm really starting to feel it.
See if
Ready?
Wow, let me get that door for you.
Okay. Well, what do you think?
Oh my gosh, my legs are still tingling. It was so
But
cold,
that definitely heals.
so refreshing. I
It's
can't
really-
explain it. Negative 320 degrees.
Yeah, I mean, when your body got out, everything rushed to every hurt spot, injured spot that you have.
Yes.
It's
and-
just like the oxygen.
yeah.
I could feel the freshness literally 98%, 96% oxygen, pure oxygen that I was breathing. It brought, in a few minutes, freshness to my head,
Yes.
clarity to my mind. And it's just like, you know, everything's about freshness, staying fresh. You and I notice in churches all the time, dealing with people, we've talked about before, every prodigal son and daughter I've ever known that went astray, if you rewind and go back, they lost their freshness.
Yeah.
And you can always pinpoint the place where it started and they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So not just in our
So
body,
true.
but in our spirit, we have to stay fresh. You know, even as a preacher, of all these years, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You've got to stay fresh. It can't be a routine.
Right.
Even in the pulpit, people think that when you're firing up people and everything's going on, and that does something to you, but really it's about that personal walk.
Yeah, man, I know that's true. You know, sometimes I'll just be sitting around and trying to write and finish one of the books that I've been writing, and I mean, I could have inspiration for tens of thousands of people, but I'll sit there and I'll look at that blank screen and I'll struggle to find inspiration for myself.
That's fun. You know what I was thinking?
What?
You know, in the Word where Jesus, when you got in that what is it called?
Cryonation.
Cryonation. I looked at the meter, it went minus 320. That's the coldest. I thought about Jesus when he said, I'd rather you be hot or cold than lukewarm. Guess what, honey? You were cold. Here.
You can't open the door.
Home, James.
A harsh reality of life is that it's not always enjoyable. Everyone has experienced rejection, whether in the form of harsh words, unreciprocated love, loss, or betrayal. Most people perceive rejection as a negative occurrence, when in reality, rejection can be one of the most powerful tools in life. Downside Up offers wisdom, guidance, and personal application while also outlining and establishing key biblical principles that promote emotional and mental wellness. Readers will understand the importance of developing a positive and God-designed self-portrait, identify their life's purpose, and maximize their potential for success. Discover the value of godly mentors and other positive relationships, and overcome negative thoughts, fear, and lack of self-confidence. Rejection is not about experiencing loss. It is an asset for fulfilling your dreams. Downside Up by Tracy Mitchell.
So March 8, 2006 was the most important day of my life. It was the day that changed my life. I was 16 years old, but prior to that, I just want to kind of set the scene for where my heart was, what it was striving for, what it felt like would complete the desires of my heart. It's interesting, Ecclesiastes 3:11 says that God placed eternity in our hearts. And so at my age, at 16, I didn't really know what that meant, but I did know my heart desired a lot of things. I actually like to think of my heart prior to that time, and even today, that our heart kind of like as a throne, and that we decide what we put on that throne of our heart. And for me, just a typical 16-year-old, I put a relationship I had with a girl. It was a 3-year relationship. I was a sophomore in high school, and we were high school sweethearts. I cared about this girl. I loved this girl. I had made a lot of bad decisions with this girl, but at the end of the day, we thought we would get married, and I oriented my life and even my future around this girl. The second thing I put on the throne of my heart was just sports. I feel like a lot of times in high school and even today, we can define ourselves not by who we are, but what we do. And so I define myself as a basketball player that dated this girl. And popularity, I just cared a lot about what people thought until God allowed the things that I clung to so hard to be taken from me. And how that happened really was one day I see my girlfriend, and she's just in tears, and just something's up. I can tell something's going wrong. I'm kind of getting frustrated, like, will you just tell me what's going on? And she basically tells me that she has been cheating on me and sleeping with another guy for the last couple days, and she just can't not tell me anymore because it's just tearing at her soul. And so it's like right when she tells me, the bell rings and we have to go to our different classes. Of course, I go to my class and I can't focus at all. All I can think about is that the girl that I love and thought I was going to marry has been sleeping with another guy. And the second thing, that was Monday, by the way. Friday, we ended up breaking up, of course. And worse, because I didn't have guys that I could talk to, or I felt like to be a man was to try not to be weak, I had all this pent up frustration and pain and hurt, and I really wasn't talking to anyone about it. We decided not to tell anyone just so really we could save face, but what it did was it allowed for me to try to deal with it on my own, and it was tearing me apart. On Thursday or Friday that week, I then got into a situation with my coach, which just where basically, long story short, is I got kicked off the basketball team. And so that was one of the worst weeks of my life, but ironically, it would lead to one of the greatest days of my life, because about a month later, after really processing how my life had went into shambles because I had put on the throne of my heart two things that could really be taken away from me. And once that relationship ended, everyone come from the woodwork asking, what happened? Why did you guys break up? What are you guys gonna do? How are you doing? And it was tearing me apart too. That no longer was I playing basketball. It made me wonder, who am I? What do I do? Where do I spend my time? And I lost a lot of relationships. My people that I thought would be my friends, because of this breakup and because of not playing sports anymore, I just didn't have the time with them, and therefore I lost a lot of friendships. And so this season of loneliness actually led to a season of kind of dependence and thinking. And so basically ended up at a church. My mom would always try to get me to go to church, and on March 8, 2006, it was right after class, school was over, and she said, do you want to go check out church? And I'll be honest, I wanted to go because I was now single and ready to, I don't want to say mingle, I was just ready to meet other girls. And I went to a church, brought one of my friends from the basketball team, sat in the back row like I always do, and I heard a man tell his testimony about how the gospel had changed his life and how he had invested and put on the throne of his heart football, but that he had gone to state and he had done and accomplished all these things that I could only hope to imagine to do, but he was discontent. And that he found that God really gave eternal drive and the eternal satisfaction that we would try to find in other things. And I decided, at the end they played a song by Switchfoot, and it was, "This is your life, is this who you want to be?" And just even thinking about that today, is still a question I constantly ask myself. Is this is your life, is this who you want to be? So whenever I answer no to that question, it's usually because I put something other than God on the throne of my heart. And so that day I gave my life to Christ. And what's funny is the guy that engaged me and really involved me when I walked into the church, he gave me a call 2 weeks later. So if March 8, 2006 was one of the most life-changing days of my life, 2 weeks later, I had that man call me, and he basically said, "Hey, I saw that you got saved 2 weeks ago, and I saw that you gave your heart and your life to God. And I know it's probably going to be hard for you to go back into the normal life that you were living. And the neighborhood that you come from doesn't have a lot of Christians that come from that school to our church. And so if you're interested, I'd love to take you under my wing, and I'd love to disciple you." And that was the second most important day of my life. And I found that my generation, many of us get saved before we're 18. I'm sure even maybe you listening to this, maybe got saved before you're 18, but not many young people then get discipled right afterwards. And that was a tipping point for me, because I got to see what it looked like to be a man of God, not just read about it, not just hear about it, but see it. And I think that discipleship is caught and it's not taught. And what I was catching from this man is that I wanted to be a good husband, even though I wasn't married, and I wanted to be a good father, even though I didn't have children. And I wanted to give my heart to God for the rest of my life, because He would always sustain the desires of my heart.
Hi, we are so excited to have our good friend Grant Skeldon with us today. Grant, I know that we've crossed paths at least a few times here in the Metroplex, and I love the things that I've heard about your initiative network. I mean, it's amazing to me because I think you've spoken to over 540, is that right, churches?
Yeah.
In the Metroplex, 33,000 pastors, leaders, network individuals, CEOs of companies, right?
There's a lot of people trying to figure out millennials.
Yes, and that's your passion.
Yeah, have you guys ever been on a mission trip before?
Sure.
Couple.
Okay, have you ever had a translator?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what country did you have a translator?
Tanzania.
Tanzania.
Mexico, Canada,
Okay,
Israel.
a lot of places. Israel, nice. Okay. Basically, what I found is God's kind of given me a platform that in the same way when you go to another country, you need a translator to translate and make the gospel relevant to that culture, because that culture is so different. We're in a place where the generation before this millennial generation is so culturally different that I've found myself at a place where I'm translating why millennials do what they do to business leaders, for example, trying to figure out why millennials are having 14 different jobs by the time they're 40,
Wow.
which is crazy a lot. Why 7 out of 10 young adults are leaving the church.
Wow.
And for parents, they're just trying to figure out why their millennial won't maybe move out or find a job or figure out how to pay for college.
Yes.
You know, Grant, as an evangelist that travels, what you just said stirred something in me.
Yeah.
I've noticed 7 out of 10, you've done studies on this, 7 out of 10 young adults are walking away, been raised in it, walking away from it. Why is that? What do you find?
I think the biggest thing right now I'll say is discipleship, a lack of discipleship,
Exactly.
a lack of community, and especially a big one is a lack of responsibility. One of the biggest questions I like to ask churches that are wondering why are millennials leaving, I'll ask them, how much does the church change because millennials are leaving? And if it's like, whoa, not much, it means that you haven't given them responsibilities. And so would you show up to something that really doesn't change if you do or don't show up? And I found many churches have not delegated big responsibilities to millennials. But when you move them from just members to owners, then they'll want to show up. They'll have to show up because they'll know if I don't show up, things are going to be done poorly.
What is the greatest misconception that, let's say, someone my age would have about millennials?
I think the biggest misconception I see sometimes, I always tell Xers and boomers, I hope that you guys would disciple at least one millennial. Instead, if you're going to complain about them, then disciple them. And so I'll say, don't expect what you don't invest. Because there's a lot of expectation. Like a farmer can't expect for these plants to bloom unless they water them and prepare them. And so one of the misconceptions, though, is, well, what do they want to learn from me? Or maybe there's a misconception because they'll see a little kid that knows how to use an iPhone maybe better than them. That is knowledge.
Awesome.
Ask any millennial. I think the number one thing they're trying to figure out right now is like, what am I going to do with my life, or what does God call me to do? And that comes through wisdom and experience. And so just because they have knowledge doesn't mean they have wisdom. I think that wisdom comes with time and age and pain, even experiences that where you hit that wall. My hope is that the wisdom of the generation before mine would be poured into the passion of this generation, instead of thinking just because they have knowledge. For example, Charles Spurgeon, he said that he said wisdom is knowledge used rightly.
Wow.
And I think that...
Say that again real slow.
Wisdom is knowledge used rightly. And so I think just because young adults have access to knowledge on the computer doesn't mean they know how to read the word, doesn't mean they know how to pray, doesn't mean they know how to have a healthy marriage, or even figure out what God has called them to do with their future.
Wow. I've entered now into my upper 50s. There'd be some pastors watching right now, and they need to hear this, because some of them probably don't understand. Great men, but just don't get it, hadn't studied this, maybe don't care. What do you find, because this is your deal, some of the biggest turnoffs that the millenniums are leaving the church over?
The church, I would say a big one is hypocrisy, or even worse is like not really letting the church be a place where you can come as you are. I joke that I think we have all done this at some point, especially I do see Christian moms do this a lot, where Sunday morning it's kind of chaos trying to get the kids up for church. And it's like, I would joke, I knew the Holy Spirit was real because the second my mom walked into church, it was like, boom, the Holy Spirit just hit her and she turned into a new person. And then sometimes I would see the Holy Spirit show up whenever someone from church would call. It could be a pastor, a Christian, but it's like there's chaos in the home, and then her tone changed. Like,
Hello,
the Spirit of
Pastor.
God, she was a new creation.
bless
She
you.
really was. And so if discipleship is caught more than it's taught,
Say
the
that
thing,
again.
discipleship is caught
Caught.
more than it's taught. So
Yeah.
it's what you see people actually living and doing. What we're discipling young adults to do and live and think is, when you get around Christians, you have to be fake. You have to put on a mask. You have to act like things are actually better. But God said His strength shows up in our weaknesses. And so I actually even think this is why a lot of millennials get tattoos, is because they had their parents' generation that hid their scars, and so they put their scars on their sleeve, or they post anything and everything on Facebook. They don't try to hide it. Now, to a fault, I don't think responding to the extreme opposite is the best, but I think a lot of pastors would do well to show your scars and allow your people to show your scars, encourage them, because the reality is we all know they're there. John Maxwell said, if you want to impress people, show your successes. If you want to impact people, show your failures.
Okay, so I know that millennials catch a lot of flack for being unstable in quite a few areas. One would be the job market. I mean, you see a lot of fluctuating there. They can't hold a job, or they try one field and then 5 years later they're in something else, or 3 years later. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I hear a lot of times that millennials are lazy or millennials are transient, and I do think some millennials are lazy and some millennials
It's every
are
generation,
transient.
yeah.
But I do think that I've been saying lately, some millennials, and I think most millennials aren't lazy, they're just uninspired.
Wow.
And so I don't think they're inspired to just get a job to make a lot of money. And I think that's a good thing. I think we saw a lot of people do that. And my generation got to see their dad a lot of time go to work and sacrifice his soul, his joy, and even his marriage or his family because he made a lot of money to put food on the table.
Wow.
But they never knew their dad. Or even if he was present, he wasn't like emotionally and spiritually the leader in the home. And so they have to question, do I want to make so much money and be that? So I think that's one of the things. The second thing is, I do think a lot of millennials they struggle with knowing, what does God call me to do?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the young adult verse that we always say is 1 Timothy 4:12? Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. Well, I never hear people usually preach the rest of it. It says, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but, comma, not a period, but set the
conjunction.
believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. And it says, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to exhortation, and to teaching. And this is the key verse I always tell millennials and boomers and Xers. If this is such a young adult verse, then why 2 verses down does it then say, do not neglect the gift you have, which I think a lot of young adults don't know the gift they have. It says, do not neglect the gift you have, which was given to you by the prophecy and the counsel of elders. And so it's not a young adult verse, it's a multi-generational verse.
Yes.
But most of our churches are not multi-generational. It's very segregated by generations. And so if you see young adults that are neglecting their gift or their calling, maybe it's because no one has ever prophesied or spoken life
Good
into
word.
it that is older, that has seen something. I know there was a man when I was 16 years old. I spoke for the very first time. I was crazy nervous. You can actually YouTube this message. I hate it. It humbles me in like a quick second because you can barely understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
But there was an older man, I don't know his name, but one day I'll see him in heaven. And he said, after I did that message, he's like, son, I really think that you should consider going to seminary. And I think God has a call on your life to communicate the gospel. And it's one thing to see a young adult put me on a pedestal, but to see a man his age that's seen people and he's been around to speak
seasoned.
life into it and to prophecy and even like pray over that changed my life.
Wow.
I go into churches every week to preach. Sometimes I feel like I'm in 2 different churches. Why do you think there's so much division among the generations? What do you think's going on there today?
I personally believe that division is the number one tool and strategy that the enemy is going to try to use.
Right.
If the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church, if I was the enemy and I knew Jesus just said, I can't beat the church, I would say, if I was the enemy, let me if I can't defeat the church, then let me try to divide the church.
House divided shall
good.
not stand.
Yeah, exactly. And so he divides us by race, I think,
Right.
and we're seeing that a lot in our nation. He tries to divide us by generation. I even think he tries to divide us by occupation, where if you're in business, that feels like the B team ministry, but if you're in vocational ministry, that's the A team. And I think it's all ministry. If you are rubbing shoulders with non-Christians, you're in ministry. And Jesus did 40 different miracles. 38 of those were in the culture. And so we need to acknowledge that
Let's touch on that just a minute.
marketplace leaders are in ministry.
Powerful. 40 miracles are recorded. 38 were outside the temple, 2 were in the temple.
Absolutely.
Wow. 2 were in the church and 38. Listen to that. Listen to that, church. That's amazing.
We say the church is not an event. It's not Sunday morning, but we treat it like it's an event and it's Sunday
agree,
morning.
brother.
And so that's another thing I like to say is like, maybe young adults aren't leaving the church. Maybe they're just leaving this event. And maybe it's because we've made this event the thing and the only thing.
I agree.
We need to change the scorecard. We need to count and celebrate a little differently. And unlike what Jim Cymbala, he says,
We just were just with him.
really?
Yeah.
He says that the things we count in church are 3 B's: butts, budgets, and buildings. And I think we
Sounds
need
like
to count
him.
how many people are making
Yes.
disciples, how many people are actually sharing the gospel regularly, how many people are rubbing shoulders with non-Christians. Because statistically, Barna found that it only takes 2 years until 80% of new Christians, once they come to Christ, it only takes 2 years and 80% of them are not even in relationship with significant non-Christians. And so we just start spending our time with Christians in holy huddles. And if we change the scorecard, it's not just about putting your butt in a seat or giving money for the budget and building a new building. We got to go into the culture. And I actually think millennials desire that kind of church.
I preach in a lot of different buildings to a lot of butts. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, man, it's just been awesome talking to you, Grant. What an amazing conversation. I just want to speak to each of you. You know, we've met tens of thousands of amazing authors, speakers, celebrities, athletes. But I'm going to tell you what, this, no lie, 27-year-old, and I hope you don't mind if I share your age, I'm doing that on purpose. The wisdom that God has implanted into him, yes, it's been imparted, yes, he's studied, yes, he's well-versed, but God has a supernatural anointing, a mantle upon his life to bridge the generations. And if you're a pastor, a leader, a CEO that wants somebody that can come in, that can speak, that can bring wisdom, that can bring knowledge, that can unite generations and make a cultural impact in your community, your life, or your business, then I want you to go to this website. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of our screen. We want you to book this young man. There's a word in him, and he's not finished. He's just getting started. There's a word in him that will impact the people that you know. We'll be right back and talk to you in just a minute.